Hi, my name is Dr. Sarah Habibi, and I am the founder of Mito Co, a children's STEM education company based out of Toronto, Canada. My dissertation research focused on characterizing novel drug targets in parasitic worms. Specifically, I looked at the parasite Haemonchus contortus, which infects livestock across North America. Now my work focuses solely on providing kid-friendly science experiments and activities for parents to do at home with their children. One of my biggest accomplishments, I would have to say, is my whole academic journey as a whole. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that I was able to graduate with all of the degrees that I have in the time that I was able to do so. So first graduating with my bachelor's of science and then my bachelor's of education. And then after that, completing my PhD and graduating with my PhD at the tail end of 2020 was, I guess, the icing on the top of the cake with just how proud I was of doing that at that time. Considering I was kicked out of my lab at that time, and then there was just this unknown limbo that I was placed in, I really just took matters into my own hands, and I took that time to wrap things up, work on writing my thesis, and then ultimately finishing my dissertation. And so that was a really big accomplishment. And then from there, really pivoting from not being able to find a job within the certain field at the time, because there were a lot of, I'm sure many can remember, job cuts in the field of academia. And so from there, I decided to start my own business. And that's been really exciting and a new accomplishment that I'm proud of. The nature of my research itself presented quite a few challenges, specifically seasonally. So I did a lot of electrophysiology in frog eggs, and in the summer months, we experienced a lot of humidity, and it was really hard to keep the room temperature controlled based on like temperature and of course like humidex factor. And so as a result, we noticed that the quality of the eggs was very poor in the summer months. And because this is the final step of our research, we really needed to have the eggs of high quality, or the highest quality possible, so that we could collect our final data points for completing the project. And so it was very frustrating every time that May and June rolled around, because we knew that we were basically going to have to scrub it through for the next few months until we got better quality eggs. And I mean, it was especially frustrating with deadlines when things would be going well, and then all of a sudden we'd be ready to test that final step, and the system would stop working. And so I often feel like I just really couldn't catch a break. And then, and then we'd have like upturns where things would start to go well, and I'd be able to clone my genes, and I'd have everything I needed to do, like make my RNA, and I'd be ready to inject the eggs. And then of course, the eggs would not be good. And so it was almost like I was chasing after the finish line, and sometimes the finish line just didn't seem like it was in sight. And so it was frustrating, because sometimes I would I'd make really cool mutations in the genes that I was testing, and I'd be so excited to see what does it actually do, and then I wouldn't be able to test it. And so sometimes it just left me feeling very defeated at times, and also unmotivated in the summer months, just knowing that, nothing was going to work. Now, professionally at the beginning, I feel like I was disappointing my supervisor because things weren't going well. But then over the years, I feel like I almost became an expert at it. And so while I did become an expert at working with the system, and that disappointment kind of went away. And so personally, it was more affecting me with, making me question if I was able to get things done in time. And so I was very much focused on the time frame of completing my research. And so I was always wondering, am I going to get enough data that I need so that I can finish in the time that I want? And so I always made me feel like I was personally being set back in grad school, or I wasn't able to achieve that personal goal of finishing on time, because sometimes time just wasn't on my hand because the system wasn't working and I had to wait a few months. But I feel like by the end of grad school, that season, it almost just turned into into a rest and reset season for me, and I would accept the fact that I knew I was going to have to recoup and just take it slow during that time, because I wasn't going to be able to get any data anyways. And so there were days where I would just have to work and adapt to whatever season I was in. And so overall, the system was finicky. It was very hit or miss. And there could be weeks where it would work, and there could be weeks where it didn't work. And there were so many factors that went into it. And so this really shifted my sense of what needed to be done. And so I really just ended up taking advantage of when things were going well, and I would work like crazy on those days and those weeks. And then when things weren't working, I would rest and recoup. I would say a coping strategy I would turn to often was exercise, like walking and going to the gym, and just things to get my mind off of what was happening in school. And so this is also something that I do now, really. When I am going through these seasons, and I need to cope, I'll work out, I'll go for a walk, I'll do something like physically active. And I guess this coping strategy wasn't necessarily something that I did right away at the beginning of grad school, but I feel like I quickly realized as I was progressing through grad school that this was a very helpful coping strategy. And then also when things aren't necessarily going well, I often use the mindset of how sometimes you almost have to take a step back and like look at the full picture and then go back and tackle the problem head on. And that's kind of how I've gone about everything my whole life and how I now run my business. And so there are going to be times where things don't work out. And so I just need to think about, okay, what can I do? Can I take a step back for a second? Can I look at take a step back from the trees and look at the whole forest, they say, and see what can I learn and how can I take this to move forward? I learned that not every season is going to be your season, and that's okay. And it's okay that you're going to experience failure. And there are going to be times where things don't work out, and there are going to be times where things do work out. But when things don't work out, it's really great to take the opportunity to rest and reset yourself so that you can best prepare when things are going to ramp up again. And so I was very much of the mindset that because I knew that the summer was almost like a dead time for my nature of research, I always took that opportunity to rest and recover as a grad student so that as soon as things ramped up again, I could go with them full force and work those crazy hours that I needed to sometimes work. And so I tried to use the downtime as a recovery period for both like my physical and my mental in grad school. I would say to always trust your gut with what you're doing, because as a grad student, especially when you're in your PhD and at the tail end of your PhD, you are becoming an expert at your topic of research. And so by the end, you really do know what's best for whatever it is that you are doing. And so just because somebody doesn't tell you to do something or somebody tells you to try something a different way, that doesn't mean that you can't go about it in a slightly different way or try something else that you deem a good fit. And so that I kind of like to look at it like trial and error, because you are the one who knows where to find things. You know what results you may be expecting or not expecting. You're the one who can look at the literature to see what else could be going on with what it is that you're researching. And so you always take that and then you trust your gut and take initiative and go after trying those different aspects of your research. Because for me, I didn't have a lot of guidance in grad school. I didn't have anybody telling me specifically what experiments I need to try. And so it was really me taking initiative to clone these different genes, try these different mutations, and take my research into my own hands. That allowed me to get enough data to publish the papers that I was able to publish in my time there. And so I wasn't, if I didn't take that initiative, I wouldn't have been able to graduate in the time that I did. And so in the end, I like to say that it always just came down to myself, pushing myself ahead and not waiting to be told how to get ahead or what to do next. And so with that, I was also not afraid to fail. And with any type of research, failure is often there. And so I knew that I was going to fail, and I knew that if I didn't take these chances and didn't fail, I wouldn't learn. And so for those grad students out there, I always like to say, like, don't be afraid to fail, because you are going to fail. So if you go into it with the expectation that you know you're going to fail, then when you do fail, it doesn't feel like such a shock, and it doesn't really get you down, because it's the expectation, it's going to happen. And so I can't tell you how many experiments that failed for me, but I always just like had to take it with a grain of salt and keep going, because all you need is that one experiment that does work, and then you're like, okay, well, this is crazy, like things are finally working out, and that could be your whole thesis for some people, just that one experiment that works out. And so I just think it's really important to normalize how necessary and how prevalent failure is in grad school. And just because you fail at something doesn't mean you're actually a failure as a person. It just means that there's an opportunity for you to learn and grow. And so also, if we're thinking of like in terms of coping, I know sometimes people cope by staying up or trying to put in even more hours, or just like work themselves to their bone. I think a great way to cope is sleep. A lot of people don't sleep. I was an avid sleeper. I think I probably pulled one all-nighter in my whole academic career, and that is a long time, many years, because sleep is so necessary for you to rest and reset and recoup. And so I made sure that I slept when I needed to in my grad school journey, just to help me be clear of mind. And so I advise all grad students to sleep. You're allowed to sleep, and you shouldn't feel guilty about sleeping, because you need sleep, because it's important for both your physical and your mental health. And so if you're out there and you're watching this and you're exhausted, go take a nap, because you need it. Thank you for watching Failsafe Science. My name is Sarah Habibi, and I hope my story helps graduate students feel a little less alone. And with that, I always like to end all of my conversations with the saying to never close a door that you haven't tried walking through. It may seem scary at first, and it may be very unknown what you're about to step into, but it's not until you take that opportunity and you take that chance that, your whole life could change.